If you have opened a paper or Twitter or any social media today, you have probably been bombarded with news that there is a civil war brewing and it's an all-out assault at the Texas-Mexico border. And both sides are trying to claim some kind of like political upmanship. You've got people saying that there is zero problem at the border, that it's all being manufactured purely for political reasons. And then you've got the other side who are also, for political reasons, screaming that there is a border problem and that there are hundreds of thousands of people coming across the border. Now, here's the thing. You can take politics out of it, and both sides can be right. Now, you're probably asking, what the fuck does this bitch know about anything? And so here's my qualifications. I spent 3 years on Operation Border Star, which was the precursor to Operation Lone Star, which is what is currently going on the border. I actually worked for 3 years as an Intel Analyst inside a Joint Operations Intelligence Center on the Mexican border in 2 different offices along the border during that 3 years. My job was legit to take all the information, and we had every single Leo from the alphabet soup that you could possibly imagine. Everything from the local police, sheriffs, border patrol, FBI, DEA, anybody with some kind of acronym would send stuff into the various offices along the border. And we would collate that and put it all into a tracking system. And we would analyze what was happening across the border. We also monitored cartel activity and things that were going on in Mexico. We knew about things that were happening in Mexico and like when people were coming up. And basically, it was my job to know exactly what the fuck was happening on the border. But that was years ago. Funnily enough, during the last election cycle with President Trump. What I find interesting about the differences between then and now, though, is during the last cycle, Trump actually had one of our reports, and it was actually the report that I had written, because he read out words and our office all just went, oh, like we wrote that. And back then, they didn't want anybody to know what was happening on the border. The day after he said that during one of the election campaign, their debates, we had to change everything. Word came down from Washington to Austin, down to our offices, that we had to change our entire email list and who our things were sent out to, because we couldn't possibly have the public knowing what was happening on our border. And how dare someone like President Trump know and actually give correct numbers of what was happening on the border. Whereas this time, it's like they're trying to use it the other way. They're saying, you know, oh, there's all these people and they're suddenly showing the numbers, and anybody who's trying to claim that there aren't the numbers is being shut down. So we've completely flipped from one way to the other, which I kind of find fascinating, but also not really, because, you know, wag the dog, right? Now, when I was working on the border, Obama implemented DACA, which is the right for kids who are already here to stay. But what people in Central and South America heard was, if you're in the US, you can stay. And we had a flood, and I mean a fucking flood of unaccompanied minors when I was working down there. And I mean, we had 2-year-olds being accompanied by 6 and 9-year-olds, and their parents were like, get up to the border, get across, like legit sending small children by themselves across the border. It was insanity. And anybody who tells you that that wasn't true doesn't know what they're talking about, because I was filing the paperwork. I was taking the reports. I was watching the border cameras, seeing these kids come across. I mean, it was fucking insane. And now we have quadrupled, but it's not just kids anymore. I mean, it is everybody. And I mean everybody. And even back then, I mean, it was everybody. Everyone's always like, oh, it's Mexicans coming across. It's not. Less than a third of people that come across the border are from Mexico. You've got OTMs, which are other than Mexicans, which funnily enough, I learned the first time I came across the border in Acuña, because I myself am an immigrant. I am originally from Australia. I migrated to the US. I spent a stint in high school in Honduras. So I get why people in Honduras are leaving and coming to the US. And I don't begrudge them that. But a lot of people coming across, and we had, like, we would do reports and we would list, and mind you, this is the only people we capture. We only know who's coming across, who we come in contact with, who we actually take in, and they think that we capture less than 10% of what is making it through the border. But even back then, like this was like 2012 to 2014 area, we had people from every country you can possibly think of. So not just the Americas, not people coming from like all the way South America and up, like people from Cuba were going across to Venezuela and Colombia and coming up. But we had like Nepalese, we had African countries coming through. I mean, we had Somalis, we had people from the Congo, we had every flavor of Asian coming through. I mean, it was insane. People who couldn't get into the US on a visa were flying to South America and making the trip up through the Darien Gap and coming into the US. And here's the thing a lot of people don't tell you. People are paying money to coyotes to get them across the border, and the coyotes are fucking people over. I mean, we had people that would come up and they would get across the border, and the coyotes would determine which ones had money or whose family had money, and they'd be like, okay, it's 10 grand to get across the border, and then we put you in a stash house until we can get you somewhere else. But once they got them to the stash house, they would lock them in and be like, well, you can only leave when your family pays another $10,000. So they were effectively kidnapping people. And the amount of women who are raped and murdered coming across the border. I mean, I was going through a sexual assault trial in Australia at the same time I was working on the border. So I was very attuned to all of the sexual assaults. And I get that like I noticed it more than other people. But we had 1 week where we had 5 women in one county who were raped and murdered by coyotes or other people in their groups as they were coming across the border. One of the offices I worked in, I maintained the Book of the Dead, which means that everyone who was found in Brooks County was notated. They took photos, they took details, they took like all of their ID if they had any, and we kept a logbook because that way if they were unidentified maybe, or if they were identified, we could get anything of their remains or anything like that back to their families. And I mean, it's fucking depressing how many people die. And the coyotes would take people up, and Brooks County's in the middle of fucking nowhere. I mean, it is nowhere, but there are lights in the distance, and the coyotes would get them up there and they'd be like, see those lights over there? That's Houston, just walk that way. But Houston's like 400 miles away. What they were seeing was lights from the local oil rigs. And it can be 110 degrees in summer in Brooks County. And so people are just struggling to get across the border. They're struggling to come through, and they are dying of like heat exhaustion or starvation or being raped and murdered. I mean, it is not the way to get into the country. And then we had, like, I would read reports from Border Patrol agents who, like, everyone hates on the Border Patrol, but most of them are actually first generation Americans themselves. So many of them had parents who come from Mexico to the US, and then they turned around and became Border Patrol agents because they spoke Spanish. They already lived on the border. It was perfect. And they would assist. They tried so hard. And you would read these reports where people would come across the border and they would capture them in the middle of nowhere. And they would be like, hey, if we send you back to your country, are you afraid for your life? I mean, they're essentially trying to lead them into asking for refugee status, right? And people would be like, no. And they'd be like, no, let me rephrase it. If we send you back to your town in your country, are there cartels there? Are there people who are trying to hurt you? And people are like, no. And be like, okay, for the third time, if we send you home for any reason whatsoever, do you feel like you might be unsafe? And people would say no. Like, they're not getting, these people are trying to help them. And so they'd be like, all right, we'll get on the bus and go home. And this was back when you could actually send people home. But the smart ones would come on a train or whatever, and they would walk straight up to the CBP, like, patrol office. They weren't trying to sneak through a border. They weren't trying to cross a river. They weren't trying to get through barbed wire. They would walk straight up to the border crossing, and they would say, my name is, I do this job, I am in fear for my life, and I am seeking refugee status in your country. And they were instantly granted paperwork. And it's changed now because now you can come across and they have a whole catch and release thing and you're sent off. But as an immigrant, as someone who came here legally and went through the whole process, I get that it's fucking hard. But before I was in the border, on the border job, I had worked in restaurants with people who were from Mexico and other countries. And they were like, I don't get why people come up here illegally, because I went to the embassy in Mexico and I'm like, hey, I don't have any qualifications. I am just a waiter, but I would like to go to America and be a waiter. And the same day they were given a visa. So if you are coming to America, here's my tips. Here's my hot tips. And as someone who is an immigrant and who has worked on the border doing this stuff, so I see it from both sides. And so I don't think anyone should, if they are in fear for their life in another country, I don't think that they should be denied refugee status. At the same time, I don't think that you should just be running across the border and taking a job illegally, because number one, watch Fast Food Nation. If you are coming here illegally, if you don't have paperwork, you're going to get stuck in a shit fucking job. You're going to be taken advantage of. People are going to put you in like dangerous positions. You have no health insurance. You have no legal recourse if something goes wrong. Like, nothing is going to end well for you. But if you go get a visa, if you go to your embassy, if you learn a little English before you come here, it will make life so much easier for you, because not everywhere are people going to speak Spanish. Like, I speak Spanish, I communicate with people in Spanish all the time. But if you get past San Antonio, if you get up north, unless you're with your gente, they're not going to be able to understand you. So learn some English, go to the embassy, ask for refugee status or ask for a working visa. They're really not as hard as people are telling you. And save that money that you were going to spend on the coyote and use it to get here legally. Because if you come here legally, you're entitled to a social security number. You are entitled to benefits. You are entitled to things that you have no legal recourse for if you come here illegally. Don't believe the coyotes when they tell you they can get you somewhere safely. All they care about is taking your money, and they're going to dump you in the middle of a fucking field somewhere. Or worse, they're going to kidnap you or sell you into sex slavery. Do not pay thousands of dollars to these people. I know it can take, in some countries' cases, because it depends on which country you come from, how long it can take to get a visa. And it can take years for you to come here. And if you don't want to wait those years to come here on an economic visa, because let's face it, most people are coming here for economic reasons, but then go to your embassy and apply for the refugee visa. Tell them that you're scared. Tell them that you're fearful. And if you're coming all the way from South America, don't make that journey. Like, go to your embassy and apply for the visa and come here legally and have everything in hand when you get here, because it's for your safety. It's for your benefit. And for all the people who are born in the US and just arguing over the border, you guys don't seem to understand the nuance of actually seeing what's happening on the border, or of being an immigrant. Coming from Australia, spending a year of high school in Honduras, moving to the US, I think I have like a very unique perspective of what it's like to go through the journey, not only of immigration, but having lived in Central America, of speaking Spanish. And it's not that you have more empathy, you just see things in different ways. Like, I see why people are coming here, but as someone who came here legally, I also think that it's not really okay when you just come across. The easiest way to explain it to people is, if you save up for years and years and years, because say you really want a nice handbag, right? And it's thousands of dollars for this handbag, and you save up and you save up and you save up, and finally you buy this handbag, you purchase it with your own money, and you're so proud because you did it. And then somebody else just walks into the store and steals it and takes it. You both got the same handbag, right? But one of you worked really hard for it and the other one stole it. And that's the easiest analogy. And it's funny because so many people who immigrated to the US legally don't like illegal aliens or people who immigrate illegally, because they went through the work. They went through the hard work of doing it correctly, and other people just walk in and take the benefits and get all this stuff, and they didn't really do anything for it. At the same time, I think if you are a genuine refugee, then you should absolutely be allowed to go somewhere that is away from whatever is putting you in danger. Do I think that that's necessarily the US? Maybe not. Maybe you would be better off in Mexico or in Central America where you speak the language, or, there are things and family and other people that can help you. But if you have family in the US that you can go to, then that's great. You should go. But also do it correctly. Do it for yourself, not because, I want you to do it. Do it because that way you are safe. Do it so that you can come in, go to the embassy, go to the CBP Border Patrol station, go to the first port of entry. Don't try to sneak through. Go up to someone in a uniform and say, look, I am here and I am looking for refugee status. And if you're just a regular person watching this, then just ignore the news. Ignore the news because we know it's all clickbait. We know that they desperately would love to have a civil war. And so they're trying to hop people up. They're trying to, push both sides. Everybody's like, poking the bear. It's an election year. Of course, everybody's going to lose their minds. And both sides are going to tell different stories. Like watch CNN and watch Fox News. And then look somewhere in the middle for the truth, because that's what we did when I was in that office. We had a screen with like legit 9 different TV things that we could turn into one big screen to watch Jeopardy. But we would have like every single news on and watch how everybody reported the news differently. And then you knew that somewhere between all of this is the truth. And thankfully, we had the truth because we were the ones who were writing the reports and we knew what was going on. But it also made it fun to watch the news to see how each side completely spun it so far different that it's always somewhere in the middle. And just remember, be nice, be kind. Everybody is just people. Everybody's just trying to live their best life and do what's right for them and their families. And if you're up north and you think that this is only Texas's problem, until now that you're getting the problem, well, I don't know what to tell you. It is kind of cute that people in Chicago and New York who've always said, everybody's welcome, everybody should be allowed to come. And now that they're not just contained in Texas and they are being bussed up to these cities, suddenly they realize that maybe America can't take hundreds of thousands of people, because it would be nice, but it's like when you have a house party as a kid and you're like, you invite 40 people because you think that that's how many your house can hold, and 600 show up and it turns into a complete shit show. Essentially, that's what is going to eventually happen if you don't maintain a border. So I guess in conclusion, after my long ramble, is I believe that people should be allowed to come here legally. I also believe in Texas's right to secure a border, because I think that you're not really a country unless you maintain a border. And there's a balance in there. I don't know how we're going to find it, especially in this little election cycle, because nobody is interested in actual solutions during an election cycle. But I think that everybody just needs to remember their humanity and to just be kind. Don't buy into the bullshit that the media is trying to push you.